Right, so again, welcome back. For those of you who might be just newly joining us this week, today is session 2 of a 4-part series. Today we're going to talk about macronutrients under the microscope. My name is Tina Michaud. I'm a health promotion specialist, and I'll be presenting today with my colleague Maya Lightfoot, who will take over towards the end of the presentation, as she will be covering the last 2 sessions, so sessions 3 and 4. So again, just before we get started, the presentation you're about to view is the intellectual property of DND. Any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on. Though active participation is encouraged, you may simply follow along without using the chat functions if you prefer. The chat's reserved for answers to facilitator questions or questions you may have for the facilitator. And note that we'll try to do our best to answer questions throughout the presentation, and for sure we'll also have a question period at the end. So welcome back. So before we jump back into today's content, I'd just like to do a quick check-in with you. So since last week, I know we had talked about maybe, trying to track our food intake, about 2 or 3 weekdays, 1 day over the weekend, just to kind of get a baseline. Maybe you've chose to track your physical activity, steps per day. Just curious to know if anybody's come up with a change that they'd like to do, or if they've kind of found anything interesting with the things that they may have tracked throughout the week. So just give you a few minutes, a few moments to share in the chat if there's anything you'd like to share. All right, so we have somebody that shared need to integrate more veggies. Yeah. Excellent, thank you for sharing. Perhaps, maybe you've tried making changes like using a smaller plate, a smaller bowl, or a glass. And, sometimes it's just about kind of being more mindful and noticing, if we're hungry, what do we tend to put on our plate, that sort of thing. So again, this is something that, we'll bring back each and every week, as it's something that we want to keep on doing, right? So we're raising our awareness of what we are eating and, why we're choosing certain foods over others. So brief overview of today's content. So a large component is going to be more bang for your bite. So you'll see this throughout today's presentation. And what we mean from that is, what foods will contain kind of the most nutrients, right? So how you can get the most out of every meal or every snack that you're eating. We're going to take a closer look at those macronutrients. So carbohydrates and fiber is part of that. We're going to take a look at proteins, fats, and we're also going to finish off with vitamins and minerals. That portion, Maya will take us through that. And she'll also discuss a little bit about balancing quality and quantity. So we'll start out with a question. What is healthy eating? So what comes to mind when you hear me say healthy eating, or that you see it written on the screen here? What are things that you visualize or think of? Again, you can share in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. Okay, so somebody shared balanced diet. Yes. Anything else comes to mind? Healthy eating. So we have somebody that shared organic, non-manufactured foods. Okay, make us think of maybe, whole foods. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. So what is healthy eating? Well, it's very, very, broad, right? But most Canadians will eat an abundance of foods and calories, but many of us aren't getting the nutrients that we actually need to maintain good health. So again, the focus for today is a lot about, those nutrients. So nutrient-rich foods that have high levels of nutrients like protein, vitamins, minerals for the fewest amount of calories. So by choosing nutrient-rich foods, you're going to be getting more bang for your bite. Okay, so the foods that are really kind of worthwhile, and that'll give you all that good stuff. Oops, a little too quick here. Okay, so healthy eating is really a combination of eating the right amount of foods in the right amounts. And by selecting a variety of foods, so somebody mentioned that like a balanced diet. So we're looking at the 3 food groups that we looked at last week. All the nutrients are going to be supplied. So balanced diet, variety, that's kind of what we're looking for. And by selecting these nutrient-rich foods, it's possible to consume the whole array, like all these nutrients, with fewer calories. So it means choosing whole foods as much as possible over processed foods. So again, if we kind of take a look at the image here, we have, the hamburger on the right. And if this is the only thing that we're going to eat in our meal with nothing else, we can see there's only, 1 slice of tomato and maybe 1 leaf of lettuce. The bread appears to be white, so likely, white flour, probably not any fiber in there. And then we have a large portion of protein and likely some saturated fat. So again, right, when we're looking at energy balance, we want to try to strike the right amount. And so why is healthy eating important? So why should we bother with trying to, eat nutrient-rich foods? Energy, yes, absolutely. That's a big one. So there you have it, increase energy for activity. So keeping in mind though that just calories won't do it, right? So you need all the pieces of the puzzle for energy reactions, muscle contractions to fire off those signals. Somebody mentioned to feel better. Yeah, absolutely. So again, although food has been classically perceived as a means to provide energy and building material to the body, its ability to prevent and protect against disease is starting to be more and more recognized. So again, really important to help prevent or reduce the risk of chronic disease like diabetes, heart disease, blood pressure, as well as lower the risk of depression and reduce symptoms. Somebody also mentioned live a longer and healthier life. Definitely, right? That falls into that prevention component. Then we also so then we also have reducing illness, as it'll help keep your immune system nice and strong. So always something that we want on our side. And then we for sure also have increase in speed of recovery from injuries and illness by providing nutrients that our body needs to heal. And then last but certainly not least, there's brain fuel, right? So the brain depends on glucose as its main source of fuel. And brain functions like thinking, memory, and learning are closely linked to glucose levels and how efficiently the brain uses this fuel source. So the nutrients in your food that you eat are really important for making neurotransmitters, which transmit signals to your brain. So low levels of these nutrients can affect the production of feel-good neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin. So there's a whole slew of things that happen chemically in the brain, but for sure everything needs to be fueled by something. And again, when it comes to the brain, the number one fuel source is glucose. So here we have these 6 classes of nutrients, and we did speak of some of these last week, water being one of them. And again, the human body needs so many nutrients every single day. But to simplify the discussion, these nutrients have been divided into different classes or categories. So water is listed as the first one, because if you remember, it tends to be the forgotten nutrient, but it's the one that we need so much of, right? The human body is about 60% water. So we tend to take water for granted sometimes and forget how important it is for normal body function. And again, last week, several of you shared some really great strategies for staying hydrated, sharing your tips and tricks, like, adding maybe a little bit of flavor in your water with like herbs, keeping a large water bottle, having some kind of scheduled reminders to drink, having it readily available. Then next up, we have carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And you can see here they're grouped all together because they are the macronutrients. And these are the 3 nutrients that we need in large amounts, hence the name macronutrient. These are the nutrients that will give us energy. And then last but not least, we have 5 and 6 vitamins and minerals. They are the micronutrients, micro because we need very small amounts of them. However, important to note, just because they're micronutrients doesn't mean they're any less important. So all of these are really key to maintaining a good health. So water, we won't spend too much time on this because we talked about this in great detail last week. But just as a quick reminder, when it comes to water, try to choose it as often as possible. We want to, reduce our intake of added sugars and fats. So trying to choose water most of the time as your beverage. And not forgetting that when we're looking at total fluid intake, things like, milk, juice, soup, tea, and coffee also count towards that. Also limiting unhealthy beverages, finding your flavor, making it accessible, and keeping, a temperature that you like, right? So if you like ice cold water and that's what really encourages you to drink up throughout the day, then by all means, but if you like room temperature water, then, make sure your water isn't ice cold to encourage you to drink it. So next up, we have carbohydrates. So here's a question, but so there's a lot of, things that we hear that, carbohydrates are really bad for us. There's a lot of kind of diets out there that exist to demote carbohydrates. So, it's kind of a controversial topic, or it seems at first glance. But yes, certainly cutting carbs can help you lose weight, but it might not help keep the weight off. So it can be really challenging to maintain a low carb diet since the food choices can be so limited. Now, again, there's many different versions of diets, but when you limit carbohydrates, you're depriving your body of a main fuel source. And there's many essential nutrients that you need from this group to stay healthy. So the message here is that, carbs are not inherently bad for us. It really depends on what types that you're consuming. So if we're looking at carbohydrates and we're selecting, refined carbohydrates in large amounts, that can negatively affect our health. Good carbs are amazing, and there's a lot of benefits to consuming them. So again, it has to do with, what types of choices, what types of carbohydrates are we ingesting? So they are an essential source of energy for your body. And again, fueling your muscles and your organs like the brain, super important. There's 3 classes of carbohydrates. Does anybody know what they are? So 3 types of carbs. All right, so the 3 types. Yes, yes. Thank you. Somebody got all 3 of them: sugar, starches, and fiber. Bang on. So absolutely, those are the 3 types. Under starches, there are complex carbohydrates. Sugars are simple carbs, and then we have fiber. So starches and sugars contain 4 calories per gram of energy. But, fiber is a special one. So we've given, a bit more extra information on those in the next couple of slides. But fiber is calorie free. So really interesting and has added health benefits too. So carbs are really efficient. So when we ingest carbohydrate foods, they're broken down into glucose. And then glucose will circulate in the bloodstream to provide energy to all cells. So it's a main source of fuel for our body. And again, especially important for the brain, which can't easily use other fuel sources like fat or protein. So again, by restricting the brain supply by restricting glucose to the brain, it can impair some memory and ability to focus. And also our red blood cells are completely dependent on glucose for fuel. So that's the only thing that they will use. So thinking of things like intense exercise, like sprinting, when the heart and lungs can't deliver enough oxygen to keep up the energy demand, energy demand of the muscles, glucose can actually be partly broken down to release a little bit of energy. So a byproduct many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, a byproduct of this shortcut is actually lactic acid. For less intense exercise like walking and during rest, like if you're like me right now and you're sitting down, fat will supply probably more of our energy. But glucose is always going to be needed when the cells use fat for fuel. So in some shape or form, our body needs glucose to produce fuel, even if it's coming mainly from fat. So when it comes to muscle glycogen, this supplies glucose for muscular work. So it's kind of a energy supply that's already sitting in the muscle, ready for action. Things like lifting, walking, running. An important thing to remember, your muscles do not share their glycogen supply with the rest of the body. So it's stored in the muscles and it will only be used for the muscles. So in terms of best bites, we're looking at whole grains, fruit, milk. So milk, you might kind of be wondering, wait, what do you mean by milk? There are sugars in milk. So if you think of things like lactose, that is definitely sugar. And then we also have vegetables, yogurt, and legumes. So in terms of total quantity, how many carbs should we be consuming every day? So about 45 to 65% of the total calories we consume each day should be coming from carbohydrates. And if we're not getting enough carbs from our diet, then the body has to use fat and protein for energy. So this is why carbohydrate restricted diets claim that they're really good for weight loss because our body will have to use fat for energy. However, neither protein nor fat is an efficient source of energy. So, if your body is deprived, it's going to try to find a way to get that energy, but definitely there's more efficient ways to get that, right? In terms of fat digestion, fat doesn't completely digest when it's used as an energy source, meaning the byproducts are called ketones will be formed. And this in the long term can build up in the blood and make your blood a little more acidic and could possibly be harmful to the body. And same for protein digestion. So the main job of protein is really to be used as a building block in the body. Its intent isn't, it's not a main energy source. So using protein for energy can compromise the building of muscles and other cells. So here I have a question for you. Whoops. Oh no, I already gave you the answer. So question, true or false? Whole wheat bread is a whole grain product. So we did mention this a little bit last week. So is this true or false? You can share your thoughts in the chat. It's a little bit of a trick question. Right, so it is false. And you might be wondering why. So it's somewhat a little bit of a play on words. So whole wheat versus whole grain is what we're going to take a bit closer look at. So whole wheat products are quite healthy choices if they're high in fiber. So we're looking at least 4 grams of fiber in each serving, which is quite a lot. Whole grains will provide more benefits. And the reason for this is because they're composed of all 3 edible layers of the grain seed. So let's take a closer look at what this, whole grain or this grain seed looks like to get a better understanding. So here we have, a nice image, a close-up of a wheat grain. And each layer of the grain will provide a unique combination of nutrients. So on the left here, we have the outer bran layer that'll contain most of the fiber. And, fiber is really important because it'll leave you a little more satisfied for a longer period of time. So it's good for satiety. Then we have the endosperm layer that contains mostly carbohydrate and protein. And then we have the germ layer, which contains vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. So if we're looking at white flour only contains the endosperm layer. So, you're missing out on like the fiber as well as these extra vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals if your main, if you're not, aiming to consume whole grains, then you tend to eat kind of refined flours. So what's the difference? Whole wheat is not the same as whole grain. They sound really similar, but whole wheat contains the bran and the endosperm layer, whereas the whole grain contains all 3 layers. So both of them are good choices. Whole grains will contain the entire grain and is a best bite, and it really gets the gold medal when it comes to getting all those great nutrients. So when you're looking at the food label, look for the ingredient list and look for whole grains as a first item on the list. Sometimes it can be really tricky if you're in the bread aisle and you're trying to look at the labels and you see, talking about grains and 10 grain bread and this type of bread. Sometimes marketing will try to trick us and say 10 grain, but it means there's 10 grains in each slice. So again, best to look at the ingredient list. And if that's something you're not quite sure how to do, Maya will cover that in next week's session. So for best bites, we're looking at whole grain breads and cereals like oats, barley, brown rice, cracked wheat, quinoa, and popcorn also falls in that category. But again, if you do choose to eat popcorn, be mindful of any added sodium or fats. So on the topic of fiber, we're going to just open up with a question. Does anybody know what the daily recommended intake of fiber is in grams for women and men respectively? So the quantity is different for women and men. It's just based on average body size. But does anybody know how many grams each day we should be consuming, ideally? All right. So it is 25 grams for women and 38 grams for men. So Speaking a little bit more about fiber. So as we mentioned earlier, fiber is a type of carbohydrate that does not provide any calories. Most carbohydrates are broken down into sugar molecules, but fiber cannot be broken down into these sugar molecules, and instead it passes through the body undigested. So there's two main types of fiber. There is insoluble fiber and soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber helps to keep you regular, so it's really important for healthy bowel habits. Insoluble fiber is found in some vegetables and fruit, whole grains, and wheat bran. Soluble fiber will help to lower cholesterol and control blood glucose. So soluble fiber is found in some fruits like apple and oranges, vegetables like carrots, okra and eggplant, oats, barley, psyllium, and legumes like beans and lentils. So high fiber foods require longer digestion, which means that they'll also make you feel full or longer after eating. So you're not as likely to get, hungry really, really fast. And again, the daily fiber recommendation is 25 grams for women and 38 grams for men. And many people only get about half the fiber they need. So I'm not sure if this is something you ever check on labels, but it's interesting to try to see, where you get your fiber throughout the day. And you can see it's, a pretty high number. So just like many other nutrients, and I'll probably mention this again when we're talking about protein, but if you're trying to get 25 grams or 38 grams of fiber in one sitting, it's probably not going to happen. So it's best to distribute your intake throughout the day. So, maybe oats for breakfast, some whole grain crackers with cheese as a snack, maybe including some legumes in your salad. Again, it's about distributing it throughout the entire day. So best bites, we're looking at whole grains, high fiber grains, vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And if you're looking to increase your fiber intake, there are a few things to keep in mind. To get the health benefits, slowly increase the amount you eat. Because if you just suddenly, double your intake of fiber, you might end up with a bit of gastric discomfort, maybe some excess gas and bloating. So you really want to get your body used to it. So again, trying to pay attention to food labels, see, which products have more fiber. Choosing the whole vegetables and fruits instead of juice. So even 100% juice will not have as much fiber as the whole vegetable and fruit. Throw in some lentils, beans to soups, casseroles, and salads. So you don't have to, sit there and just eat a can of beans to get your fiber. You can kind of sprinkle it in fun ways. And also nuts and seeds, right? Almonds, sunflower seeds, and pine nuts also have a little bit of fiber in them. So next up we have protein. So just like carbohydrates, protein has 4 calories per gram. And protein's well known as that structural part of our bodies. So the building block for bones, muscles, tendons, because they're all primarily made from proteins. Protein also has some other really important jobs in the body. So hormones like insulin are made of protein, as well as digestive enzymes. And protein is also something that will help keep you feeling fuller and less hungry after you've eaten. And also keeping in mind that, protein is so important for normal growth that, we tend to give it like this special priority over other foods, right? We tend to make of it as if it's, that much more important than everything else. So it can sometimes lead us to feel or believe that, well, if a little bit is good, then more must be better. Keeping in mind that there is a limit to how much protein your body can actually utilize. And the maximum at this point that's studied by scientists is about 2 grams per kilogram of body weight that the body can actually use. And this is observed in persons that are doing really heavy strength training programs. So if you don't have a really intense strength training program, the likelihood that your body's able to utilize that much protein is less likely. All that to say that excess protein is used as fuel or stored as fat. So when protein is used as fuel, your liver and kidneys have to do some extra work to remove that nitrogen part of the protein to then be able to make energy out of it. So again, not as efficient. When it comes to best bites, fish, poultry, tofu, legumes, lean meats, lower fat or milk alternative products, and small amounts of nuts, right? You don't have to eat the whole bag of nuts. Keep in mind, nuts do have high fat content as well. And how much? Well, it's 10 to 35% of your energy or caloric needs. So again, really important for healthy, active bodies for growth. You need less protein than you do carbohydrate. And a balanced diet can supply all the protein a person can use throughout the day for all the jobs required in the body. So choosing protein foods that come from plants more often, the benefit to that will be that it'll provide more fiber as well as less saturated fat than other types of protein foods. So again, if you're looking to increase your fiber, this is a way to kind of, make a switch and get more of the nutrients you're looking for. And again, reducing saturated fat, increasing your fiber intake can be really beneficial for your heart health. And as I mentioned, same thing applies to protein here. North American diet tends to be, maybe more carb oriented in the morning, and then maybe the evening at dinner tends to be really heavy on the protein. For example, if you're eating, a T-bone steak, let's say. So if you're trying to get all your protein in one meal in one sitting, maybe you're hitting that daily value, but your body can only synthesize and process a certain quantity at a time. So if you're looking to maximize your ability to kind of uptake and use the protein, it's really best to spread it throughout the entire day, throughout all your meals and all your snacks. So I'm having trouble with my animations today. So it keeps giving you guys the answer. Question, maybe you haven't seen it, true or false? If a food is fat-free, it must be healthy. And if you want to elaborate on why you picked true or false, that would be interesting as well. All right, so we have 2 votes for false. Other less healthy ingredients are added. Some fats are good fats and some are needed. Absolutely. False. It can be usually full of sugar. False. Yep. So absolutely. So this is false. If a food is fat-free, it must be healthy. It's not automatically healthy for the reasons that were highlighted. So thank you for your participation in that. So again, we have to be careful kind of with those marketing claims, right? Oh, it's fat-free. And then we think, oh, okay, less calories, it must be healthy. That's great. But it can actually be really high in salt or sugar or other undesirable nutrients. So again, highlighting the importance of being savvy when it comes to label reading. So don't get hooked on these fat-free claims. We'll look at more in detail next week. So fats, all right, it is a concentrated way to store energy. Carbohydrate and protein contain only 4 calories per gram, but fat is more than twice the amount at 9 calories per gram, right? So again, really energy dense. So fat allows us to store energy without a lot of bulk. So if we stored only bulky glycogen molecules in our bodies, we would be probably really puffy. We'd probably look like, the Michelin Man to be able to store as much energy as we do. So keeping in mind that even a slender person can store enough energy in fat to fuel a marathon. So just to give you an idea how energy dense fat is. So as somebody did mention in the chat, we need fat in our diet. Fat is important. It helps absorb plant chemicals associated with health like beta carotene, so that orange color from carrots and melons. And it also allows us to absorb fat-soluble vitamins, right? So vitamins A, D, E, and K all need fat for us to be able to use them. It also serves as a building block of hormones. So just like proteins, fat's super important. Fat digests slowly, so it keeps us from getting hungry and helps keep you feeling full. And also, I think, most of us are likely on agreement. It helps make your food taste better by giving it a nice texture or a nice flavor. So the new dietary reference intake suggests 20 to 35% of energy from fat. And there are 3 types of fats that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about unsaturated fats, saturated fats, and trans fats. So let's jump in. So unsaturated fats is known as the healthier type of fat. So the type of fat that we want to try to aim for. Okay. Unsaturated fats tend to be liquid at room temperature, and so can be found in vegetable oils, safflower and sunflower oils, fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, trout, herring, and sardines, avocados, and nuts like almonds, pistachios, pecans, and cashews. Unsaturated fat is beneficial because it can help keep our heart healthy. And that's because we see increases in the good cholesterol, so high density lipoprotein, also known as HDL. So we're just going to use HDL for the good cholesterol. So the HDL will increase as we consume unsaturated fat. In some cases, we can actually see a decrease in the low density lipoprotein, so LDL, or that bad cholesterol. So this type of fat can be kind of like a double agent. So it's increasing the good and decreasing the bad, which is really what we're looking for, because if we have a lot of cholesterol, it can lead to plaque buildup in your arteries, which can increase the risk of heart disease. And just a note here, it's not your consumption of cholesterol foods that will increase your blood cholesterol, because your body actually makes its own. So it's more so having to do with the types of fats that you're consuming. That will look a bit at saturated fats in a moment, but an increase intake in saturated fats will have or can have an impact on your low density lipoprotein, so your LDL cholesterol or the bad cholesterol. Okay, so when we're talking about, not all fats are bad, well, this is actually exactly what we mean, right? We need some. It's important, it's essential. So diving a little bit more into unsaturated fats, and this can be a little confusing if we start, trying to memorize everything. But just a kind of overview, they can be divided into 2 types. So unsaturated fat, we got monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. Where do these names come from? Well, they come from that chemical structure of the fat. So mono means that there's only one double bond, and poly means that there's many double bonds. So again, looking at that chemical structure. But this is not a chemistry or biology course, okay? So it doesn't really matter, because both of them will have positive effects on your cholesterol, okay, as well as your heart health. So we want to include both of them in our healthy, balanced diet. It's commonly heard that most of the fats that we consume should come from mono, so 2/3, because they have even higher health benefits. But again, both are really good. So let's focus on including both of them in our diet. Sources of monounsaturated fats include olive oil, which probably has one of the highest level of monounsaturated fats. It's commonly recommended by dietitians. There's also peanut oil, canola oil, sesame oil, avocados or avocado oil, and non-hydrogenated margarine, which we'll talk a bit more about hydrogenation when we talk about trans fats. And, you know, again, when it comes to trans fat, it's almost, you know, it's banned in Canada now, but I won't jump into that right now. So also most nuts and seeds will have monounsaturated fats. When it comes to polyunsaturated fats, we have a whole list here: corn oil, soybean oil, fish, cottonseed oil, again, nuts and seeds. So we're seeing some recurring, some patterns, right? Some of the same foods that we're seeing come back. So again, both are really great fats for our heart health. And we also mentioned, you know, the term essential. So, you know, what do we mean when we say an essential fat? So basically, an essential fat is an unsaturated fat. So it's a positive thing. It's a good type of fat that can't be made in our body. So when we say something is essential, it's because our body isn't able to synthesize it, to create it. So it's imperative that we get it from our food, from that external source. So again, these fats are very important for metabolic processes. It's so important that we consume foods that have essential fats. And two of them that we're going to talk a little bit about are omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6 fatty acids. So again, not so important to remember all these different types and numbers, as long as you know that it's important to consume omega-3 and omega-6. Sometimes it can be really hard to narrow which ones you're getting. But, you know, instead of trying to say like, okay, well, did I get omega-3s today? Did I get omega-6? Oh my goodness, did I get fiber? Did I get this? Did I get that? We're really trying to move towards, you know, eating foods with sources of fats as well as variety, balance, right? So it's kind of always tying back into the same thing to make sure that we hit up all these great nutrients that we need. Some sources of omega-3 fatty acids, fatty fish. So again, we mentioned some of those: Arctic char, salmon, mackerel, anchovies, trout, flaxseed. And flaxseed is a really great source, but keep in mind, you have to make sure it's ground to be able to access that omega-3, because the outer part of the seed is so solid that our bodies actually can't get to the fat in the middle. So if you're choosing flax, make sure it's ground up so that you can actually reap all the benefits from it. There's also, you know, walnuts, canola oil, soybean oil, tofu, and fortified foods like margarine or yogurt or eggs. And sometimes you'll see food manufacturers using terms like omega-3, N3, LAA, EPA, or DHA. And then we also have the omega-6 fatty acids. So again, vegetable oil, safflower, sunflower, soybeans. So again, it's a lot of the same stuff coming back: walnuts, other nuts, seeds, poultry, fish. There's many sources, so there's a lot of different ways that you can get the essential fats, which is great because we need them, okay? Of the two, typically omega-3 is a little bit more difficult for people to consume because fish is a really great source, but not everybody eats fish. The recommendation is to eat fish about 2 to 3 times per week to maximize your intake of omega-3. But if you don't eat fish, you'll maybe have to be a little bit more creative. And again, kind of, you know, grinding flaxseed and maybe sprinkling that on meals, adding it to smoothies, eating more nuts and seeds so you can put that on your salads, and eating fortified foods is another way. If you are concerned about your intake of omega-3, you might be wondering, well, do I need a supplement? It's very individualized, so it really depends on your diet. So for the most part, people don't need it. It is best to get all nutrients from your diet. However, if you do have concerns, it's best to talk to your MO or a dietitian before choosing to go ahead with a supplement. So it has been 45 minutes. So just a reminder, if you've been sitting this whole time, just stand up, move a little bit, do a stretch. You can do some chair squats, jumping jacks, whatever feels good. You can even stand up for the rest of the presentation if you like. It's just a reminder to kind of sit less and move a little bit. So we're going to continue on with our discussion on fats, but now we're going to talk about saturated fats. So in terms of what this does for our health, and specifically our heart health, saturated fat unfortunately does increase the LDL cholesterol in our body, so the one that we want to try to keep low. Saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature. So if you're thinking about a fatty or a marbled steak, that would be saturated fat. Some dairy has saturated fat unless it's labeled as fat-free. For example, butter, yogurt, milk, cheese. And there's also 2 exceptions when it comes to plant-based oils that contain a high quantity of saturated fat. And does anybody, or they're listed, I was going to quiz you again, but they're listed. So those 2 oils are coconut oil and palm oil. So question, true or false, coconut oil is considered a healthy fat. So true or false? That is correct. So it is false. So coconut oil really did get a health halo in the past years. There's lots of claims that came along with it, like helping to cure certain ailments and helping with weight loss. While some research does show that taking coconut oil supplements along with eating a low-calorie diet might help with losing abdominal fat in obese adults, there's really more research that needs to be done before we can start recommending coconut oil supplements to help with weight loss. Also, there is no evidence that says using coconut oil will help cure conditions or illnesses, like Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, IBS, Crohn's disease, or viral infections. So being careful of, health claims that we may read. Coconut oil is made up of medium chain saturated fats. So, this might offer some health benefits like raising HDL, so that good cholesterol. However, there's still not enough research to confirm this health benefit. So we're kind of still waiting to hear more. So what's the take-home message for this? Well, if you enjoy the taste of coconut oil, you can use it in small amounts once in a while, right? So it's kind of like butter, right? Choose margarine most often because butter is quite high in saturated fats, but if it's used in small amounts, and that's totally fine. So, if you've been using a lot of coconut oil, maybe it's time to kind of rethink that and swap it out by choosing other oils like canola and olive oil that will have more unsaturated fats in them. And keeping in mind, too much of any oil or fat can cause weight gain because, as we saw earlier, fat is very energy dense, containing 9 calories per gram. So finally, we have trans fats. All right. So this is the one that we should be avoiding altogether. Okay. The good news for us Canadians is that we don't really have to worry too much about it here because it was actually banned, and producers can no longer add trans fats in foods as of September 2018. So we are 2022. Some things were slowed down because of COVID, but all things considering, it's still a fairly new regulation and might still be in the process of being phased in. So you might still find some products that were produced before September 2018. Hopefully you're not consuming them, because if it has that long of a shelf life, I'm not sure, probably not too healthy of a food. But all that to say that anything produced after that, it can no longer have man-made trans fats. So this was something that was used as an additive to products. So Again, trans fats, mostly man-made chemical structure. So they've taken a liquid fat and made it into a more solid fat so that it can be easily added to foods like donuts or baked goods. So when we're talking about trans fats, it does the same thing that saturated fat does. So it has that increase in that low density lipoprotein, so that bad cholesterol, but it also decreases the good cholesterol. So it's kind of a double whammy in terms of, doing everything we don't want it to do, as opposed to, unsaturated fat, which will, be very beneficial when it comes to cholesterol levels. So keeping in mind, you might check a food label, be, shocked that, oh, trans fat is still listed and there's some in this product. There are some foods that naturally have some trans fat, okay, but they're not man-made. For the most part, these fall under categories of dairy and meat. They have some, but it's really not the same type of detrimental effect as the man-made ones will have on your health. And again, there's not quite as much worry about this when you see it naturally occurring in foods, and it's usually in very small amounts, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Another thing that was really used commonly for trans fat was margarine. So, margarine might have a bad rap because of that. So it used to be made of trans fats or partially hydrogenated oils. Now we see on margarines a lot, statements non-hydrogenated oils. So using more natural oils rather than that man-made trans fat. And you'll likely see that on pretty much most, if not all, labels today for margarines, non-hydrogenated, because they're just not allowed to do that anymore in Canada. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, margarine or butter. So again, both of them will likely have really similar amounts in terms of calories, but because they're both, sources of fat, the difference will really be the margarine will have higher unsaturated fat, whereas the butter will have a lot more saturated fat, and that's the one we want to try to limit. So here we have a comparison of common cooking oils and a breakdown of how much monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and saturated fats that are contained in each of them. So looking at the chart, yellow and blue represent the healthier fats and red is the less healthy fat. So we want to try to look for the ones that have a higher total unsaturated fat percentage and hopefully little or zero saturated fats. So again, if we're looking at the top here, we have the canola and safflower oil, and then you want to contrast at the bottom of the chart, you have coconut oil, butter, and palm oil. So again, the health effects of oil do not change with heat, but the concern is that you're aware of the smoke point of each oil. So at what temperature the oil starts to burn or smoke. So what does that mean? So smoke points and characteristics of different oils, might lead us to choose certain oils for certain tasks or, purposes in the kitchen, right? So if we are cooking with an oil and it doesn't have a very high heat tolerance and it starts smoking up, it doesn't smell very good and it's probably might not taste good anymore. But the issue with the smoke point is that it tends to increase carcinogens in the oil. So again, that's something that we want to try to avoid. You don't want to hit the smoke point and start seeing your oil smoking. If you do, it's best to discard that oil and use some fresh oil. So, if you're doing all-purpose cooking at higher temperatures, one example is canola oil. It has a really high heat tolerance. But if you're looking, maybe to have an oil for salad dressing, that's when the medium heat oils like olive oil could be useful, right? So again, keeping in mind, are we sauteing? Are we baking in the oven? Is it for a dressing? So taking a look at what oils to do which jobs to avoid kind of, smoking and burning the oil. So guidelines, right? So the guidelines for fats included saturated and unsaturated. So every day the guidelines to consume 65 grams or less of total fat. And again, this can be done fairly easy. What's important to note is to make sure that you're having less than 20 grams of saturated or trans fats. And again, as we mentioned, trans is a little easier to limit because they're banned now. So saturated fats will be shown on the nutrition labels of foods. And you want to try to have at least 3 to 6 teaspoons of unsaturated fats per day in order to reach optimal health. So remembering that some foods like avocados have naturally occurring fats in them already. So you don't need to be adding oils to all your foods, right? So there's no need to take a spoonful of oil and, consume it as is. Oils count, right? If they're included in your salad dressings, if you're sauteing your vegetables, right? And you use a little bit of fat. So there's a good chance that you're hitting your values if you use some fat for cooking. So again, to help stick to these guidelines, paying attention to the food labels and just kind of raising your awareness, looking for 2 grams or less of saturated fat per serving. So it's a little bit easier to look at sometimes if it's less than 8% of your daily value per serving and less than 3 grams of total fat per serving. So again, no stress to try to memorize all this. You're going to revisit it again next week with Maya. And speaking of Maya, she's going to take over now and discuss a little bit on vitamins and minerals.
Right. Hello, team. Just saying hi. We'll be spending the next couple of weeks together. So we're going to get started talking about vitamins and minerals. So this is the micronutrients that we were talking about. Tina was talking about the macronutrients, the ones that gives us energy, the ones that's kind of basically the ones that take us through our day. But these are the micronutrients, like she said, but remembering that it doesn't mean that we need them any less and that we have to worry about getting each and every one of them, but they're all important and they all do a job in our body. So we don't plan around, am I getting my riboflavin today? Am I getting my, vitamin B12 today? Am I getting my vitamin D? Because we are talking, like Tina was saying, if we get balanced meals and we get whole foods and we get fruits and vegetables in all different colors sort of throughout the day, throughout the week, then we're going to be getting a well-balanced diet. When we stick to our proportions, we get the nutrients we need, the macronutrients we need, and the micronutrients we need. Because if we were to keep track of every single vitamin and mineral that we were to need, we would need a checklist like this every day and check off our list. Did I get my thiamine today? Did I get my niacin? Did I get my vitamin A? But that's when we're looking at Canada's Food Guide, how to eat with our balanced plate, when we have half a vegetable, when we have whole foods, and when we have our protein foods, all of these things are included. So imagine if you were to cut out a full food group. So let's say you're going to cut out your, you're going strict vegetarian and you cut out your meat group, like you're still going to get proteins. But if you cut out all meat and alternative, or just, meat foods, like chicken, beef, eggs, those kinds of things, so meat-based foods, then you will not get any vitamin B12. And so there is a risk of having a deficiency in vitamin B12. Does anybody know what a deficiency in vitamin B12 feels like? Has anybody ever had a deficiency in vitamin B12? Because it's quite a significant change in our I'm going to say overall feeling, overall health. So it doesn't look like anybody's typing. So let me tell you, is everybody still there? Can you just put your hand up or give me a thumbs up just to so I know that everybody's still there paying attention? Excellent. So a deficiency in vitamin B12 feels the same as fatigue or depression. Isn't that interesting? So a lot of the times, if you're not absorbing, even if you are eating some meats, and the reason I know this is because it's happened to me. I eat protein-based foods and I wasn't able to absorb vitamin B12. And so when you are getting blood work done, this is how we found out that I was deficient. Does anybody know what a deficiency in iron would feel like? I'm sure you've heard of people being anemic before. Right? Yes. So when we're deficient in iron, we're tired, we're lethargic. Yeah, out of breath. It's difficult to get going because you don't have the energy to keep moving. So when we look at, memory is bad too. I don't know that one, but if that could be very, very possible. So when we're looking at these types of things, we know that these minerals, these vitamins play a really important role in our bodies. So even when we're thinking about our heart pumping and we talk about electrolytes, does anybody know which minerals are included in these electrolytes? What keeps our heart pumping? Well, what's interesting, I don't see anybody typing this what's interesting is that several minerals are involved in heart pumping, but sodium is involved. Sodium is something that we actually need within our bodies, but we don't need a lot of it. We need about 1,500 milligrams as opposed to 3,000 is what we're getting. So what I'm trying to say basically is that if we get a variety in our diet, we get different fruits and vegetables, different colors, we keep all of these food groups, and we eat a balanced diet, then we're not going to have to worry about deficiencies in our bodies. One more question. Does anybody know which vitamin that we do not get between the months of October and April because we live in Canada? Yes. So another thing that has been recommended is Canadians between the months of October, and usually they say over the age of 50, but there's no harm in supplementing in vitamin D over the months of October to April because we're not getting enough sunshine. It's a sunshine vitamin. And also being deficient in vitamin D feels like fatigue. You feel tired. So if you feel tired, maybe you're dehydrated, maybe you're deficient in vitamin D, maybe you're deficient in iron. The only thing that you can find out is getting your blood work done. And that's the best way to know if there's any deficiencies happening in there. So when we talk about getting that best bang for your bite, like Tina's been talking about, choosing better foods, getting more energy for less calories, or more vitamins, minerals, nutrients for less calories. When we're looking at biting into more for less at lunch, let's say you are going out for a meal and you think, you know what, I'm going to be healthy today and I'm going to get a salad and I'm going to choose a Caesar salad. Now, does anybody know what goes into a Caesar salad? Has anybody not have a Caesar salad before? What kinds of things are in a Caesar salad that make it yummy, but make it less healthy? Creamy dressing, right? So typically when there's cream in there, it's higher fat content. What else is the bacon? Yeah, there's bacon bits. There's deep fried croutons. There's cheese. Yes, garlic, olive oil. Good. So that's what makes it, well, tasty. But when we're looking at just having a salad, this is sort of the type of amount of calories that we can even look at just for a Caesar salad. So when we're looking at 3 cups of romaine lettuce, like 3 cups of romaine lettuce sounds like a lot, but it's only 30 calories, lots of nutrients, lots of minerals and vitamins in there. But then we're looking at 3 tablespoons of dressing. Just the dressing alone is 240 calories. And then a half a cup of croutons and 2 2 tablespoons of bacon bits, 70 calories. So just in your Caesar salad, you have 440 calories. So if you're going to go out for lunch, how can we make going out for lunch healthier? Maybe eating more food for less calories. What else do you think you could do when you look at here, soup, salad, and even a dinner roll? What kinds of things do you think we could switch out to still have a soup, salad, and a dinner roll and to get less calories than 440? What other things could we have in there? Okay, so we're asking for a whole wheat, or should we say maybe a whole grain roll, right? A whole grain roll, perfect. Okay, so when you're looking at the top of this particular Caesar salad, it says we have 3 servings of fruits and vegetables, which we get from the romaine lettuce. And then we have 1 serving of grain product, which is our croutons. But everything else is in that sort of non-nutritious, extra fat kind of food group, right? So looking at over here, we have 3 servings of fruits and vegetables because we're also getting a salad. So 3 cups of salad, again, 30 calories, but we also have a soup and a dinner roll. So instead of getting 3 tablespoons of salad dressing, we get a tablespoon of olive oil and maybe vinegar, balsamic vinegar, malt vinegar, whatever kind of vinegar we like. So even just swapping out your salad dressing, look at this, 240 calories for Caesar dressing and then 70 calories for olive oil and vinegar. Then we have a full cup of lentil soup. So lentil soup is a broth-based soup, so no cream in there. Lentils will increase our protein intake. And we know that there's fiber in there because Tina took us through what kinds of foods are best for your bite. Then we have a small whole grain roll. And so that's another grain product. And then a cup of skim milk, which is 70 calories. And so you're having a whole extra soup, you're having a whole grain roll, and you're having a drink, and you're getting in less calories and more nutrients than just a basic Caesar salad. So when we say, you know, I want to lose some weight, I need to eat less. You don't need to eat less. You just need to make different choices. We need to swap out different things because when you think about this is a whole lot more food, but a whole lot less calories and more, I'm going to say ticks in the box in terms of your serving sizes for each of your food groups. All right, so does that make sense? Because we're going to keep sort of looking at different things. So, hey, we're going to do another swap. So we're looking here at swapping out this particular meal. So here we have 2.5 cups of white pasta, 1 cup of tomato sauce, and cake. So can anybody tell me how many servings of grain product are in this meal? When we know that 1/2 cup of cooked pasta is 1 serving, we have 5 servings of white pasta. So 5 servings of grain products, which, like Tina was saying, when it's a refined grain, which means that you remove the outer layer and the inner core, we just get the endosperm. It's really kind of just starch. We're not getting any fiber in there. So we're getting 5 servings of white pasta. So 1 cup of tomato sauce, basically that's 2 servings of fruits and vegetables, quote unquote, and then a piece of cake, which really doesn't fit in any of the food groups, unfortunately. So looking at this meal and knowing what we did to swap out more bang for your bite, how can we, I'm going to say, upgrade this particular meal for more nutrients and less calories? What kinds of things do you think we can do instead? We're still having spaghetti, but what can we do instead? Okay, I'm looking at people typing stuff in. I'm excited to see what we've got coming. Okay, switch to whole wheat or whole grain chickpea pasta. Okay, we can lessen the amount of pasta. We don't need 2.5 cups. Maybe we can have 1.5 cups. And sauce. I'd keep the cake though for happiness. Okay, fair enough. Maybe you share the cake, right? Maybe just have half. Make it veggie noodles instead. Okay. Eat fruit instead of cake. Perfect. So when we kind of combine all of the options or all of the answers that you gave us, we're definitely going to get more bang for our bite regardless. So let's say instead of getting 2.5 cups of white pasta, we got a whole cup less. So 1.5 cups of whole grain pasta. So we increase our fiber intake over here. We still have a cup of tomato sauce because, you know, we can maybe even add some ground beef in there, some ground chicken to add some protein, but we don't need to because in this salad over here, it's a bean salad, which is our vegetable source of protein and lots of fiber. And we increase our greens. We increase our vegetable consumption. So we have 1.5 of whole grain pasta, 1 cup of tomato sauce, salad with beans, and then yogurt and fruit. So our yogurt also counts in the protein section because now we know that dairy and protein have been combined in terms of a food group as protein foods. So we're getting a lot more nutrients here and maybe the same amount of calories or less. So just when you think about when we eat with our eyes, this is a lot more food than just having 1 plate of pasta, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can do when it comes to swapping things out, whether it comes to, you know, swapping out, if you have a sandwich, great. Then instead of having white bread, we can have whole grain bread. You'll feel full for longer. Maybe swap out what's inside your sandwich, right? Increasing with lettuce and tomatoes and maybe, you know, cheese instead of, you know, 2 slices of bologna, right? We have to sort of think about how am I going to get more nutrients in my day? How am I going to complete my list of minerals and vitamins and macronutrients so that I can have a whole balanced diet? I get all of the nutrients, all of the vitamins, minerals that my body needs to be healthy, but we're also getting in less calories. So when we're looking at making some changes, right, we need to remember that making some changes, we have to start slowly because sometimes we get overwhelmed with a change or we think we're making a change. But what we need to remember is that it's consistency that's the key. So if we're making a change, it's going to be a change that you can maintain for a long period of time. So this is not a diet. This is not cutting out carbs. This is not becoming keto or Atkins or whatever it is. This is changing your lifestyle so that you can be healthier for the long term. Okay, this does not have an end period. So when we talk about making a change, it has to be a change you can sustain, right? So it has to be realistic. So making one change that you can keep. So we've already asked you at the beginning what kinds of changes you were thinking about making, whether that's changing your pop to sparkling water, whether that's changing, you know, Caesar salad for oil and vinegar dressing, whether that's changing the type of pasta that you choose, the type of, the amount perhaps of protein that you eat in a day, and sort of spreading it out throughout your day. So making one change that you can keep and a significant change. Okay. Think positive. So focus on what you should eat, not on what you shouldn't eat. So focus on healthy eating, not dieting. We're not going on a diet. We're changing our way of eating, right? Because when we think of diet, what do we think of? Restriction. You can't eat this, you can't eat that, you shouldn't be eating here, you shouldn't be eating there, never go out, never eat chocolate, never eat chips. That's restrictive. The minute I say don't eat chocolate, what do you want to do? You want to eat chocolate, right? So every food is not off limits. It's really just about the amount that you eat, right? Focus on foods you should eat. So I should eat more vegetables. I should choose more colors. Let me have a fruit instead of cake. You know, it's really yummy, actually, if you get frozen berries and then you put them in a bowl in the morning and then you have them later and they're melted and they're in their own sauce. You haven't added anything to it. It's absolutely delicious. So when we think about how can I add color, should I maybe choose, you know, hummus instead of onion dip when it comes to different things that I can put on my vegetables or crackers or whatever? This is not a diet. This is something that you want to try to maintain for a long period of time. So it also has to be within your reach and be realistic. There's no one food that's bad. And that's really something we have to remove from our brains. There's not one food that's bad, but you have to think about how often you eat it and how much you eat it. I personally don't like, I'm going to say quote unquote cheat days, because when you're on a cheat day, you might be kiboshing all of the efforts you made all week, right? Just by maybe cheating, instead of having a piece of pizza, you have the whole thing and then you feel sick the next day. When you have a little bit every day, you can have a little treat. When we talk about treats, treats are between 100, 150 calories, whether that's a glass of wine a night, whether that's one slice of pizza, whether that's a piece of dark chocolate every night. I have a jujube drawer and I have a couple every day after my meal. That's my sort of pleasure every day. So when we think about making a change, what works for you? What fits into your diet? What fits into your life? Are you a 6 small meal kind of person throughout the day? I eat breakfast and I have a snack at 10 o'clock at night. So I eat constantly throughout the day. Some people like to eat, you know, within a small amount of time, but then you have to get all of your nutrients that all of your daily requirements in that period of time. And that might work for some people. Some people like to eat all at night, not great, but as long as you get your nutrients. Some people like to eat mostly in the morning and just have a snack at night. Whatever works for you, as long as you're spreading it out throughout the day, you are getting the nutrients that you need. You never feel hungry. Does anybody know what hangry feels like? That means that the carbohydrates are lacking. Your brain is starting to require a little bit more of a glucose uptake or a snack. You feel hungry, maybe you feel thirsty. Increase your water intake. So it's really about finding a pattern that works for you, finding where eating feels comfortable. You never want to feel full, because when you're full, your whole energy is taken up by digestion. So maybe thinking, that's why we get tired after eating a big meal. So, you know, be realistic. Find a way that you can eat for the rest of your life that's comfortable, that makes you happy. So when you go out with your friends, you can, you know, eat and not feel guilty about it, because guilt and food shouldn't be, you know, in the same sentence. Food is a pleasure, but it's about how much you eat and how often you do it. Any questions about that when making a change? Does anybody kind of have an idea of how they're going to make a switch within their day? Looking at labels, checking out to see if your bread has fiber in it, maybe switching out your the amount of oil that you choose, like Tina was saying. What oils are you choosing? Maybe instead of Caesar salad dressing, you change your dressing choices. So really, it's important to make sure that if you're going to the grocery store and you buy the same exact food every single time, and that's normal because most of us do that, we're creatures of habit, can you make a different color choice? Can you choose a different fruit this time? Maybe choose a different fruit every week when you go, just to get different colors on your plate. What about a different vegetable? Buy things that are seasonal, because they're usually healthier, there's more nutrients. And remembering that when we talk about nutrients, we have to think, you know, how long has this particular carton of blueberries been sitting in a truck, versus if I got some frozen berries, because that's what's, you know, we're in Canada, blueberries aren't in season right now. So if I got frozen berries, the nutrients are at their highest when they're flash frozen. So it's okay to kind of switch things up like that. Any questions about making changes and about the nutrients that we've seen today, whether they're macro, whether they're micro, right? So here are your home activities. So home, opt for some best bites. So when we're looking at, what kinds of vegetables are you going to choose? How are you going to choose grain products or crackers or cereal even, right? Minimizing on lowering that sugar intake, lowering the sodium intake, increasing the fiber intake. Does anybody remember how much fiber we need, women and men? Tina told us earlier today. Does anybody want to take a guess? Oh, yes. So 25 for women, 38 for men. And remembering that, like Tina was saying, don't do it all at once. One of my participants once in a weight wellness class decided to eat, her whole 25 grams in a psyllium bud or a bran bud breakfast. And there was a lot of gastric discomfort. Okay, you need to work your way up slowly. And the more fiber you intake, the more water you need. Okay, because that is how everything sort of flushes through your system. And it's like a colon plow. It takes all the garbage that it's supposed to take out and it brings it to the bowels. So focus on building a healthy plate, whether that's, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, whether that's for your 6 healthy meals, whether that's for how you eat. These are the proportions. Eat more fruits and vegetables, more colors. Eat a quarter of your plate or a quarter of your intake in protein foods, and sticking maybe closer towards the plant-based ones because that has higher fiber and less saturated fats. When you're getting your grain products, making sure that you're increasing your fiber intake and maybe staying away from, as much as you can, the refined flour, right? Because it removes all of the good stuff from there. Record your physical activity and your steps. So when we talk about physical activity, we know that exercise and nutrition are very, very closely related, right? They work with each other. So Canada recommends 150 minutes per week of moderate, right? So you still need to get your heart rate up. This is not about sort of moseying. This is really about walking with intention, whether that's higher intensity fitness classes, walking with your dog, but it's really about getting your heart rate up. Daily steps, right? Anywhere between 7,000 to 500 is a really great goal. And then continue with your SMART goals, right? Setting things that are specific. So remembering that specific basically means that you can measure it, right? Specific and then measured. When you think about, I want to eat more vegetables, or I want to eat 2 more servings of vegetables, is something that you can measure. You can't know how many pounds or what weight looks like when it comes to, I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, maybe you're going to gain muscle and you won't lose any pounds, but you'll lose a whole bunch of, I'm going to say you're going to take up less space. So think about things that are attainable. My SMART goal might be, I want to walk 150 minutes a week. So I'm going to break it down to 20 minutes a day. Or so something that you can measure, something that you can check off every single day that you have done that will improve your health. Thinking about things you can increase as opposed to things you need to remove. So that is basically the end of this week. So any questions when it comes to best bangs for your bite? Tina and I are here to answer questions. And if not, we will see you next week, same time, same place. Well, I will see you same time, same place. Tina will be on vacation. So thank you very much for participating. Here are some resources if you want to follow us on social media. Lots of super duper information that we post every week on Instagram and Facebook, as well as we have our videos on YouTube. I'm going to stop the recording right now.